The story of Ontario Hydro begins at the turn of the 20th century when electricity was just beginning to become the preferred power source for manufacturers. Now, there were three main factors in play at the start of the 20th century that helped to catalyze the formation of the Hydroelectric Power Commission of Ontario, which would later become known simply as Ontario Hydro. 1. Provincial resources. Ontario had a lot of people and a lot of moving water, but it didn't really have any coal. Ontarians had been importing coal for a long time, but a major miners' strike in the United States and the subsequent trade embargo had us pretty spooked. Of course, this eventually worked itself out, but petty nationalism and the greater expense and relatively slow global shipping routes associated with the alternative supplies definitely made hydro look a lot more appealing. 2. New technologies. The shift to electricity in manufacturing was a technological change in and of itself, but more importantly for the creation of hydro, new high-voltage transmission lines were just beginning to be developed that would allow for rapid, low-loss transmission of power over great distances. 3. Ontario's widely distributed population and manufacturing base. The large number of municipalities spread throughout southern Ontario meant that there was a large demand for power in lots of different cities, towns, and villages. Thanks to democracy, once enough of these municipalities got on board with the movement for public power, they held enough sway in the legislature to be able to have their own way. And so, building off all of these factors and the legwork of a small group of earlier politicians, Adam Beck, the mayor of London, Ontario, successfully campaigned for the creation of the Hydroelectric Power Commission of Ontario. While this started out primarily as a transmission/distribution company, at the behest of Beck and the early Hydro clan, they eventually branched off into Generation 2. This cheap people's power meant that Ontario had lower electricity rates than its neighboring states and provinces, thus giving it a competitive advantage in the manufacturing industry and spurring a huge amount of industrial development. Over the years, the commission developed into the corporation known as Ontario Hydro. Because it had a great deal of autonomy, hydro grew and grew, and after exhausting Ontario's ready supply of hydroelectric power, branched off and began to spend a lot of money establishing a large but efficient bureaucracy, building a lovely skyscraper in downtown Toronto, and constructing massive nuclear and coal-powered plants. This put the company and the province into a whole lot of debt, and though it created a lot of jobs, it generally didn't leave Ontarians feeling quite as smiley as they used to towards the once beloved hydro. Realizing the massive problems present in the organization, the provincial government began to take steps to rein in hydro, starting with legislation demanding a greater degree of accountability. When NDP Premier Bob Rae appointed oil man gone global governance environmentalist Maurice Strong in 1992, it marked the beginning of the end for hydro's monopoly on electricity in Ontario. 1998's Electricity Act set forth how hydro was to be broken up and which organizations would take its place. The follow-up agencies included, among others, the Independent Electricity Systems Operator, Hydro One, and Ontario Power Generation. Now, about a century after the founding of hydro and over a decade since its breakup began, where are we? Well, from the point of view of environmentalists, we're actually in a pretty interesting place, thanks primarily to three factors. 1. Reduced demand. Thanks to improved conservation efforts and incentives, and huge losses to the manufacturing sector following 2008's global recession, Ontario's total energy demand has been falling. 2. Aging infrastructure. All those lovely nuclear plants, coal plants, and general holdovers from when Ontario Hydro was busy growing, developing, and expanding in the 70s and 80s are now starting to enter their autumn years, and they'll be coming due to be replaced or refurbished pretty soon. This reduces the overall impact of technological entrenchment that tends to be pretty deeply rooted in energy systems. 3. Political will. For the first time ever, green at the gills, if not a compliment, I mean hey, they're still saying you have gills, is at least better than it once was. The recently enacted Green Energy Act is intended to give Ontario's Ministry of Energy sweeping, if somewhat sketchy, new discretionary powers to help with the development of the province's renewable energy portfolio. With the last of our coal plants set to go offline in 2014, the province needs to come up with a reliable and economical long-term plan to meet our energy needs. But thanks to the factors listed above, many Ontarians are optimistic that we are well on our way to a greener future, even if we aren't there yet. Have a great day.